Hey guys, my name is Ben Berman, and welcome to the Starting It Up podcast, where I interview all types of entrepreneurs, uncovering actionable steps and inspiration that you can use to build your business, your side hustle, whatever it is that you're trying to create, and live the life you've always wanted. On this episode, we talk with John Puma, who's the co-founder and COO of Wizio, the first virtual reality-based listing platform for real estate. John's story is a great example of how entrepreneurship comes in many forms. He first discovered Wizio through an on-campus accelerator, was super impressed with the team and mission, offered to help them as an intern, eventually becoming a co-founder, and is now leading the charge in integrating VR into real estate and creating a more transparent and effective rental process. Here it goes. Hey guys, welcome here today. We have John Puma, who is the co-founder and COO of Wizio. They are a VR software that helps realtors and real estate companies show off apartments and properties. So John, go introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit more of a background on who you are and what Wizio does.
Yeah, thanks Ben for having me on, and congrats on launching this podcast. It's a really great resource for entrepreneurs trying to start a new company. So
thanks, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate
I'm John. I've been working on Wizio for the past 2 years or so. And essentially, we're building a platform for property managers and brokerages to market and manage their listings. So we've started in Boston, focusing specifically on the apartment rental market here. So we're unique in that we only do apartments. There are other companies in the space that focus on sales listings or commercial, but Boston and apartment rental market is really unique, and it's been a challenge, but we've come up with a model that works.
Awesome. Yeah. So I know that you mentioned you guys only do apartments, are only focusing in Boston. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about why you saw that as being the specific niche that you wanted to target, and exactly like what you saw in there and what room you saw for growth that made you want to target it?
Yeah. So I'd say that the reason we started with apartment rentals is really the whole reason why we started Wizio. And it was out of a problem that we had as college students. We were, our second and third year of school looking for an off-campus apartment. And, with a few roommates, you'd spend hours online looking at Craigslist ads and all the other marketing sites. You'd be looking at listings that had fake photos, photos of entirely different properties, some that are, from different countries even. And you'd reach out and you'd say, I'm interested in that unit. And you'd spend your time, you'd spend the real estate agent's time running around the city, looking at apartments. And then you show up and it's nothing like you saw online. So you've just wasted everybody's time in the process. And, it was very clear that this is the issue that especially college students are having in Boston. And that still remains true today. And, we just saw the opportunity of, virtual reality was just coming up at the time. And we saw the opportunity to combine the two, bring VR to apartment rentals. And that's kind of where it started. And we built our initial relationships in the rental market, and we've just kind of gone from there. But it all started out of that initial need to fix the problem we were facing.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, that makes total sense. From what I've seen, I think a lot of the best companies are started by, a group of people kind of see something that's flawed in the status quo and they go and try to fix it. I know you mentioned VR. I'm just a little bit more curious, like, how exactly does the product work? And I'm just wondering, like, what is the biggest differentiator between what Wizio does and what other companies do when you go onto their platform and you do kind of like the drag and drop within an apartment? What's the differentiating factor?
Yeah. So I'd say the main thing with currently what's out there on sites like Zillow or Craigslist are your traditional photos. And, they can be altered. You can make it look bigger than it actually is. And that kind of goes back to that initial reason why we started, is we need to make it a more transparent process. So what we're doing is we're using 360 cameras, and 360 cameras have come out in the last few years, but there are a ton of them now. And essentially, what we do is we send out a photographer to a listing, and then they take a 360 photo of each room, And then we upload all of those photos to the Wizio platform, and it creates that interactive virtual tour. So you have a much better idea of what the space looks like. You can feel like you're actually there without going. You can't hide anything because it's a 360 photo. So there's nothing to edit out. You get what you see basically. Um, so we compile all these virtual tours, and then we sell them to realtors and property managers to help them market their listings and increase the experience for the tenants.
Awesome. Yeah. So from what I'm seeing right now, I think it's not necessarily a two-sided marketplace, but there are definitely multiple factors when it comes to the person who's going to be paying for the service. So so one question would be, what's like the revenue model for you guys when it comes to who's actually paying for you to come take these photos, and then also how do you find and pay the photographers that are actually taking the photos? So, because I'm guessing they aren't the same person.
Yeah. So we have actually been through a few different business models over the past 2 years. And that's really just because of, where we're at, learning more about the industry, making mistakes. And we've settled on a business model that fits the rental market here. So essentially, uh, any unit that is available on the market, we send out a photographer to create that virtual tour. And we're essentially taking that cost up front, and then we are charging a monthly subscription fee to real estate agents to access that content. So essentially, we're building a large database of these virtual tours for apartments, and then we give them to the agents through a subscription model.
Okay, wow. Okay, yeah. So that actually is different from what I originally thought. So you're getting people who are kind of like freelancers coming into an apartment. Do they have to do they have to let like the real estate agent know that they're coming, or do they come maybe like during like an open house or something and take the photos there?
Yeah. So basically, we work with the property managers, and we gain access
Hmm.
through them to go into the units whenever they're vacant. So there's no tenants in them currently. It's either whenever the last person moved out, we come in during that short time frame. And in Boston, that's typically September 1st is the biggest day for the turnovers. So nearly 80% of apartments turn over in Boston, and that's just because of how many college students there are here. So you have that window of basically 48 hours that you can get in there and take photos. And to go off of to answer your last question about where we find these photographers, the majority of the ones we work with are currently either photography students in one of the local schools, or people that just enjoy photography as kind of a hobby and are interested in virtual reality or real estate. We've had a lot of inbound interest from people in the space that are just, want to learn more about what we're doing and see this as an opportunity to further their skills in photography.
Cool. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I know that, there was an article that came out saying that you guys actually captured VR content for 5% of the total Boston apartments that were available for that September 1st move-in. And I just want to kind of, dive into that and how did you guys do that? Like, were you guys planning for, for like the past year, knowing that September 1st is this huge date? Just what were kind of some of the big moves that you guys were planning to have, that major impact on that date?
Yeah. So I can't go into all of the specifics around how we did it, but it did take a lot of planning, a lot of working with property managers and brokers. A lot of our customers were really helpful in setting it up. Just as you can imagine, running around thousands of properties during that 48-hour time period was really an operational challenge. Having different photographers in different parts of the city, it was a challenge, and we definitely learned a lot. This was our first September 1st filming that we did at such a large scale like this. So we were really excited that it worked out. We learned a lot for next year, but we have furthered our status and grew to about 5% of the market currently.
Nice. And I know that, 5% is huge, but when you guys look at it at a high level perspective, like what numbers are you kind of trying to hit in Boston, before you guys start, maybe expanding into other areas? I know that you guys are in DC right now. But are you really trying to keep like Boston, that home base where you guys eventually take over everything and slowly creep into other territories? Or are you guys planning on doing that more in the short term and focusing on Boston, kind of on the back burner?
Yeah. So Boston has really been our focus, and I'd say the majority, the reason behind that is just because we all went to Northeastern. All of our initial customers, our relationships, our advisors are based here in the city, and that's kind of just what we fell into. We have started to identify other markets that would be good for what we're doing. So we have a few customers down in Houston currently. Um, Houston is an entirely different market for real estate, which would be a whole nother conversation. So Boston is very unique in what we're doing. The business model we have up in Boston would not fit in Houston, um, mainly
Hmm.
because of the broker and tenant represent the relationship between the two. So we are looking at other markets to expand to. We're slowly doing that. We'd like to reach about a 20% market share in Boston before fully expanding into a new city, um, just to further prove ourselves to customers, investors, kind of the overall community, and gain, increase Wizio as a brand that people know.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally makes sense. I know that, kind of from experience and from seeing other companies do this, when you start spreading yourself a little too thin, you definitely, aren't able to provide that service and just the quality that your customers are expecting in all those different areas. So it's super important to really establish yourself somewhere before you, start going everywhere else. So, definitely good to hear that. And, I know you mentioned, that you were from Northeastern and all of your co-founders were from Northeastern. And I know that, from talking to you before this, you spoke about how you weren't the original, like, creator of the company. You weren't like the person who just fully came up with the idea, and how you actually joined, Wizio after they had already been created. And I just want to, talk a little bit about that, because a lot of the times when people think about, being an entrepreneur, they're envisioning themselves as being the person that, gets that idea and then brings it
Right.
from completely the ground up, when, there are many other viable paths. You can join, an already, successful team that's just doing something just because you really like what they're doing, want to help. And I know that's really similar to what your story was. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely a unique story, and that would be my piece of advice to anyone thinking about either starting or joining an early stage startup. Is that I saw Wizio going through the on-campus accelerator, and I was actually part of the Entrepreneurs Club team at the time, which was putting on that accelerator. So I got to witness firsthand that initial founding team, what their mission was, how they worked together, and the reaction that basically everyone else in the community had to them. And that reaction was basically what drew me to reaching out to the team at the time, and saying, I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. Is there any way I can get involved? And that would be my piece of advice: is don't be afraid to reach out and just learn more about a startup that you see and you're interested in. Don't feel that they've already settled on their official team. They don't want anyone else to join until they start hiring people. That's definitely not the case with either Wizio at the time or any other startups that I've seen go through Northeastern specifically. Is people are always looking to talk to new potential hires or just gain feedback on what they're working on. So that's kind of how it started with me. I initially started as kind of a part-time intern, essentially, working on specific projects for Wizio, and I stuck with them throughout that year and my time at Northeastern, until I joined full time after graduating last May.
Great. Yeah. So I mean, just hearing that, you're talking about how you went from, seeing this as an outsider, essentially wanting to get involved quickly, messaging the people, the founders, saying, hey, is there any way I can help? Providing enough value after you do that to the point where, you're a co-founder. You essentially are, when people look back at this in like 5, 10 years,
Uh,
it doesn't matter like when you started exactly, you're a co-founder, you really added that important value. So it's definitely good to always have that, that be an option for everyone, because a lot of people get bogged down because they don't have that idea, but you might not even need to have that idea. You could just be the person that can help someone else grow theirs. So that's, it's awesome that
yeah,
you mentioned it. And
yeah. I mean,
yeah, sorry, go
I would
ahead.
say, even if you're joining early on, it's not really about that title of being a founder. Being the first employee at such an early stage, or one of the first people to join the team, is still really a big deal. You are just a part of it as much as anyone else, and you're gaining the same experience, I'd say. Other than the title, you still can learn a lot, and there's a lot of room to grow that early on.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about how you decided to take the leap from, it's one thing if you're working on this while you're in school, but actually going full time and pursuing this after graduation. Can you walk me kind of through your mindset at that time? A lot of people would get nervous. They want to get a traditional job, they want a good paycheck.
Right.
But yeah, tell me kind of your story and why you decided to focus on this instead of going a traditional route.
Right. Yeah, I'd say it was definitely a big adjustment going full time on an early stage startup. Uh, you know, through Northeastern, if you're familiar with the co-op program, I was going through, coming out of Northeastern, already having worked full time for a little over a year for one of the big four accounting firms. So at one point, I was very much in that mindset that that's what I'm going to do after I graduate. It's a reliable, steady job that I can learn a lot in and grow. And that was what I was thinking for a while. And then I worked at Mass Challenge with you. Worked at the Entrepreneurs Club on campus, and that was kind of my introduction to the entrepreneurship startup side of things. And that really excited me, and I got interested in different topics. And I didn't just jump right into founding my own startup right out of college. I kind of eased into it, learning more about what I really want to do. So I went into graduating and joining full time, completely ready for that transition. Um, but once I did that, it still was something new that you had to get used to. So you go from what you're used to for 4 or 5 years at college, classes, clubs, and then the startup on the side, to your full day is committed to working on your startup. And that was a big leap. Just the day to day routine, realizing that this is what you need to make happen. And, your future really depends on making it work. So it was definitely not the traditional route to go, especially from Northeastern. Um, I'd say that Northeastern is set up with the co-op programs so that when you graduate, you're basically guaranteed a job from wherever you work. And that may be the case, but I'd say kind of the ecosystem around entrepreneurship is really developed over the past few years, that it's become a new normal to work on a startup during your time at school, and even continue on after.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of get a little deeper to like, how does it feel, or how did it feel to, you graduate, you probably see a bunch of your friends get these like, high paying jobs where,
Right.
maybe they're getting like they're training for like 2, 3 months, they're kind of going, learning, and essentially it's like in a way it's like being back at school, but you're just getting paid for it now. So I know that you're over there, building this company, grinding in some, probably like little office if you even had one at that time. Just kind of walk through like the mentality, like what are you kind of telling yourself? Because I don't know if you felt like this, but I would feel like, yeah, did I make a mistake? Maybe I could have had that. Just doubting yourself, like what was going through your head exactly, and what kept you really focusing on Wizio and not saying, oh, maybe I'll start applying for jobs on the side and things like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I that thought definitely crossed my mind. Kind of early on after joining full time, and it's hard not to think about those things just because that's what's going on around you. For the most part, your friends are going to be at those steady jobs. They're going to have a more regular schedule than you, and it can get tough at times. You know, sitting in an office, like you said, if you have one, or if you're back on campus in a co-working space. But a lot of my time early on was spent by myself, in a WeWork, but because we're a small team, you know, a lot of times you're working on projects by yourself, and it can be hard to motivate yourself sometimes. And I'd say that the thing that kept me going was, telling myself, what I was learning right now and the experiences I was having, is a lot more than, anyone else is having, or I would have had if I had joined, a larger firm. So it's kind of like recognizing those types of small things, the new skills you pick up, and overall, experience in starting this new company. Whatever it may be, learning how to do taxes for your business or how to get insurance. Like that's all stuff that you would never have to do at an established company. Um, so I'd say, recognizing that that's happening, and then just also like celebrating the small wins. So, not everything is going to go great, but you also don't know if you're going to fail until you do. So celebrating the small wins, whether that's getting some good, press from, a local paper or whatever it is, to, getting a new customer, or, those types of things can really motivate you more than you might think they would.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And something that I heard a long time ago was, you go and start your own thing. Best case scenario, you succeed and, life is great. Worst case scenario, you fail. But the stuff that you learn throughout that process can now help you get, an even better job than you could have in before you started. So it's really scary when you jump into things, but when you look at it like holistically and really think about all the value that you're getting, there it's really, you might be losing on some things, but overall it's kind of a win-win. If you're at least like, trying really hard and going all in. So yeah, I wanna talk a little bit more about Wizio and how you guys are doing right now. So one thing I'm always interested in is like, how'd you guys get your first customers, and when did you actually start receiving those first paying customers, when the product was like fully developed and fully ready to be in use?
Yeah. So kind of goes back to Northeastern again, and they had a lot of resources for startups on campus. And early on, we had met a few different advisors. Just through random meetings we had, we met people in the real estate space. And those initial connections, provided us with a lot of feedback about the industry, but also introductions to other people in the space. And those people became our first customers once we had validated our model a little bit more, and continued to receive feedback from them. So every one of our first customers was basically a referral through an advisor. Um, and that's kind of how we real estate is a very word of mouth industry, especially here in Boston. So we have one customer over here in this neighborhood, and they introduce us to another one, and it kind of spiraled like that.
Yeah. So what tips would you have for anyone, who's in the real estate space, who at this moment might not have, a ton of connections? Like what tips would you give them to really get their foot in the door in that space? Since like you said, it is pretty exclusive, and the people you're dealing with might not be the easiest people to deal with, for various reasons.
Uh,
So just kind of give some advice to someone who wants to get into that space, but doesn't really have too much of a background there.
yeah. So I mean, I personally had no experience with real estate before joining Wizio, other than that experience looking for an apartment. So it's definitely doable for anyone out there who wants to get in, but thinks they don't have the background for it. Um, I've learned a lot over the past 2 years. I never thought I would know so much about the process as I do today. And my knowledge has just come from talking to potential customers, but also people in the space that have nothing to do with Wizio's business. So, that might be, a lender, or, it could be anything, a property developer, commercial real estate, people in the hotel space, hospitality. They can teach you a lot about the industry without, specifically overlapping with what you're most interested in. Um, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So, another question I would have is, what are what were slash are the biggest obstacles for you, so far in Wizio? Like, when it comes to actually, people in the real estate, a lot of the times they rely on, more legacy types of, systems or ways of doing business. We were talking about this before, a company like Craigslist is still, the leader
Yeah.
in the space when you're looking for apartments. So they aren't typically at the forefront of, innovation and high tech. So when you're coming in with this VR company, like what were some of the biggest obstacles in getting there, and how did you, get past those objections and really show the value that you guys are bringing?
Yep. Yeah, I'd say that was and still is our biggest challenge for a lot of the people we work with. And I think that is still unique to Boston specifically, and the rental market. So I'd say that technology has been adopted at more of a rapid pace in, say, commercial real estate. So what we face is a lot of times the customers that we approach, they have been around for decades and they use technology that is 20 years old, and that's what they've always used. They have no interest in using anything new. And the most common phrase we hear is, it works good enough. That's how we've always done it. And that's a hard thing to get people past. So before you even tell them what you're doing, they say they don't like technology. And then when you introduce VR as a topic, it's a hard sell. And because of that, these brokers and property managers that we work with, they have a lot of different challenges that they face. So, we're only solving one small part of that, and that's the marketing of their properties. So when you get deeper into conversation with them, you start to identify all of those other challenges. And, at times they can get overwhelmed with, all these different technologies and what you're actually providing. They confuse it with something else. So a lot of our time spent in these sales meetings is actually just general education of what technology is out there. And then we explain how we kind of fit into the overall tech landscape in real estate. So I'd say, once we get them past that point of recognizing, this is something they need or want, we, even early on with people who recognize that we were still an early stage company, there's just a few of us working on it. We're just out of Northeastern. Nobody really heard of us. The biggest thing was they didn't trust us, or we had no reputation in the industry. So that took some time to build. We are going into properties. They have to be able to trust our photographers. So that was just kind of, more conversations with these people, slowly proving that they can trust us. One thing that helped a lot was getting press coverage, such as, sites like Bostino or, things like that. The fact that other people are writing about you in a positive way, and you can use that to your advantage when you're talking to potential customers, and you can kind of point to that and be like, oh, like they said this about us. We actually know what we're doing. So our biggest challenge is, overcoming that legacy system and way of thinking, to get people away from how things have been done.
For sure. Yeah. So, I think talked about like two things that I think are super important to kind of drill down on. The first thing is that, a lot of times when you're in business, you're solving a problem that people might not necessarily even view as a problem. You know, they don't know that there's something better out there. They've been doing something, you know, their whole life and it's working fine. And, you know, sometimes they view anything that can improve that as a headache. Whereas, you know, and what you guys did, or what you said you did was like, you don't go in there, you know, guns blazing, really trying to just, you know, show them exactly why, like, you need a
Yep.
switch today. You know, you said you slowly talked to them, you had a lot of conversations, because a lot of the times, like, if you come in and immediately say you need to stop doing what you're doing and do what we're doing, like, people are going to think you're just some, you know, sneaky sales guy. You're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
So that is definitely, you know, when you're doing these kinds of deals, that's the way to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. And I guess since you brought it up, my answer to the last question, we didn't intentionally go about it that way. We learned the hard way, I'd say. Um, Very early on when we were still at Northeastern, um, we had we had a, an article come out about us and what we were planning to do in the industry. And that was, very early on, we knew nothing about how real estate worked in Boston. And we had our plan. We were going to do it no matter what it took, without talking to enough customers. And it made a lot of people very unhappy. Um, I think that's specific to real estate, and we approach things way too fast without learning enough about who our customers were going to be. So we had to take a step back and slow down and then go through that process that I just described.
Yeah, yeah, of course, and also it's super important, like you mentioned, all the media coverage you guys are getting. It's super important to be seen as a thought leader in the space. You know, people are just wired to trust people when other people trust them. So that's
Right.
always helpful. And now that you kind of mentioned that you really had to find out exactly who your, you know, ideal customer was. What I'm curious about is when it comes from like a high level vision, like who is the that customer, you know, that customer persona that you guys are targeting? Because when I imagine it, I'm thinking of a larger, you know, realtor, a larger property. It's hard for me to imagine, you know, small landlord. You know, I lived in Mission Hill for a summer.
Okay.
I couldn't imagine like that building that had like 30 units that were, you know, in whatever condition, just throwing college students in there.
Right.
They're using something like this. So what is, you know, what's that exact customer that you're targeting, and do you plan on having this become something that everyone should have eventually, or are you really sticking to a certain segment of the market on having this?
Yeah. So we currently are targeting small to mid-size property managers. So that means most of the people we work with represent between 50 and close to 1 or 2,000 listings. And the reason for that is, they're large enough that they have this pain point of, not having a great marketing solution and introducing this next type of content for their apartments. And it allows us to grow faster than it would targeting those small landlords that maybe have 1 or 2 units in Mission Hill. And there are a lot of those in Boston. And, while we aren't working with them right now, I think over time, as this type of technology becomes more widely adopted in the industry, those landlords will start coming to us, and we'll, make that mutual connection. But for now, we're targeting the small to mid size.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And now to kind of back up and talk a little bit about the numbers. So, I don't know exactly, like, you know, whatever you're comfortable with giving, but how many customers do you guys currently have? How many, you know, partners are you guys working with? And then revenue for the past, say, like, so far in 2018, a kind of range that you're comfortable with
Yeah.
giving.
So the big metric that we work off of is that number of apartments on our platform, which we already said earlier was just over 5,000 or so unique listings. So total numbers a bit larger than that, but kind of the target customer that we just talked about, we're working with a little over a dozen of them right now, just because brokers in the city represent such a large number of apartments typically. And then for, the first few months of 2018, I'd say we've done about 25,000 or so, as we're transitioning to a new business model.
Gotcha. And say like after the transition's complete, what do you envision? I don't know if this is something you could answer, but like what do you envision as the dollar sign per unit that you guys are planning to make? Like what does that look like if that's the way you're even tracking it?
Yeah, I think it's a little different because we're doing a subscription model. The dollar amount per unit is
Hmm.
actually very small if you divide it across the price of the subscription. Um, and there's an intentional reason behind that, in that because these rental agents are representing, hundreds or even 1,000 listings at their firm, they're not going to be paying a high price per virtual tour that they have. And in the rental space, the margins are very slim. The commissions that they're making are very small in the majority of the apartments in the city. So they're not willing to pay a higher price for this type of content. So we had to create this model, this subscription model that spreads that price out, across across a number of listings over a period of time. So
Gotcha.
it's a
Makes
little
sense.
different. It's not, we're not saying, every tour is, we want to have a return of $200 on that apartment.
Makes sense. And then to better understand, the value that you guys are creating, could you kind of give us some numbers on, let's say, an apartment that has Wizio is doing, X much better than like, say,
Right.
the same apartment that wouldn't have Wizio. What kind of numbers are those?
Yeah. So the numbers that we like to use are by using Wizio's virtual tours, our clients can close twice as many sight unseen deals. So that means tenants that never actually go to the apartment in person, and they make that decision to rent based off solely on the virtual tour. The second is uh, Wizio virtual tours can cut down the number of in-person tours by as much as 50%. So our selling point is you can send a client 10 Wizio virtual tours, and then the client can narrow it down to maybe one or two that they want to see in person. And by the time they get there, they're much more ready to make that decision. So those metrics are kind
Wow.
of
Yeah, that's huge.
operational and efficiency metric, I'd say. But those are very big ones for our customers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about, people in real estate, brokers, they kind of, spend the entire day, showing apartments. And then, at the end of the day, who knows if the person's going to buy,
Right.
they might just go somewhere else. You never know. And you don't get paid until they do sign that lease. So something like this, I
Yeah.
can obviously see why, there's a demand for it.
Yeah. I'd say
And
that
now, I want to talk a little,
I
yeah,
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say that that's the third component is building that relationship with their clients. So they can basically in Boston, you can work with any agent that you want. The majority of the agents all represent the same apartments. So it's a matter of trust and building that relationship. If you work with one agent who uses virtual tours for all of their listings, uh, we've seen that that client is much more inclined to continue working with you rather than jumping ship and going to find another realtor. So that is really key. It's a relationship business in real estate. So we're trying to build that.
Yeah, and those are always, a lot more difficult than building something clear like a product where you build it, it works, and then you put it out. The relationships are
Right.
something that you never know what might happen, and it could take a long time. And now just to kind of understand the competitive landscape, like there are definitely, other companies that have virtual tours. I don't believe they're, like virtual reality where they're fully 360, but are you seeing are you targeting right now people who don't use any kind of software at all, or are you also targeting companies that are using that other virtual tour software and showing them why Wizio is a better bet?
Yeah. So I'd say that the current solutions on the market are mostly catered to sales listings. And that is a much higher production. You'll typically hire a photographer that does these virtual tours, and it'll cost you a few $100s. And because of that, nobody does them for rentals. The other competitor that we've seen pop up in the rental space are solutions that are a do-it-yourself model. So they give real estate agents a 360 camera and have them go out and do it themselves. So they're creating their own content. So Wizio is unique in that we're really the only ones that provide the full service. We're not making the real estate agents spend their time taking photos. We do that for them. So we're kind of a full service solution. But the landscape is still developing, and we keep seeing new companies enter the space, but no one's doing exactly what we are currently.
Makes sense. And from what I'm hearing, this sounds like this company is largely bootstrapped or fully bootstrapped. Where do you guys stand in terms of raising money? Have you raised any money? And if not, is that something that you're planning on doing anytime soon?
Yeah. So we've received two grants from the Northeastern on-campus incubator, both for about 10,000 each. And we're currently raising a small friends and family angel round, I'd say. And we're closing that up soon, but we do have the plans to raise a larger seed round in the upcoming months um, to head into the next rental season, uh, basically late this spring.
Gotcha. Any words of advice for someone who is trying to either get a grant or get that first, friends and family around, where they might not have, a ton of rich friends or rich family or like know those people, have those kinds of
Yeah,
connections.
I'd say definitely leverage the on-campus resources if you're still within that community, a current student or recent alumni. Leverage it for those types of grants, but also for the connections. So you don't have to have them within your direct network currently, but you can kind of go about it the same way that I talked about finding our first customers and advisors. Just sit down with people. They don't have to be in the industry you're working on, but if you know that they work with other companies, other startups, they can always introduce you to angel investors or just other people. They might know somebody who works at a large firm in your space that has an investment arm or something like that. You really never know what you're going to find. But other word of advice is definitely start early. Take advantage of those grants that have specific deadlines and criteria, that kind of thing. Because once you start getting into discussions with friends and family, angel investors, angel groups, or small VCs, that takes a very long time, and it's something we learned. You really have to budget for uh, being prepared to being prepared for it to take a long time. And I know a lot of people say fundraising is a pain and it takes forever. You really don't recognize that until you're actually in that process. That it was not a rumor. It's actually true. So definitely start as early as you can.
Yeah, for sure. When you're raising money, it's always good to kind of like think of how long it's going to take and then maybe just double that to be safe.
Double,
Um,
triple,
so
yeah.
that's definitely, yeah, keep going as far as you can. It's always good to have a long runway. And as we're kind of winding this down, I want to, ask a more broad question. So you guys are in the VR space, like on a personal level, what are you most excited about in the space? Outside of real estate, what other areas, industries do you think are going to be most disrupted by this technology? And how do you think that's going to play out? And when do you think we're going to start seeing real game changing companies come in and really shift the landscape?
Yeah. So I'd say a little bit of a background on where it's currently at. Over the past few years, all of the money and all of the use has really been in gaming, VR and gaming. That's where the dollar spend is right now. Real estate and things like healthcare are like less than 1% of the overall VR market. And I
Oh
think
wow.
that that's going to change. Those numbers are going to go up in real estate, healthcare, and the education space, I'd say. And I think that that is kind of due to a movement towards more functional uses of virtual reality and augmented reality. So, gaming is cool in VR, but is it solving a day-to-day need for corporations or individuals? And I'd say that's the reason why things like real estate, looking for an apartment, used by hospitals, I think those are going to pick up a lot more. Especially in Boston, I'd say that the biggest thing will be in healthcare, just because Boston is such a healthcare hub. I know a lot of the hospitals and practices, insurance companies are testing out new types of treatments, or whatever it may be to improve patient outcomes. So that's the biggest space that I see growth in VR right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think there's always like that shift where it goes from something that's really fun and enjoyable in your life to the point where it's something that drastically improves your day-to-day life. Whereas, gaming is really cool. You throw on a headset and you feel like you're right there, whether it's
Right.
like Fortnite or whatever. But like when I think about, VR and AR, I really kind of imagine, a world where like we're just walking down the street, you look at someone and you're able to like, you get information about them, and they have that about you. It's kind of like a social network, but it's in real life, it's happening. And there's a ton of
Yeah.
uses for that in the medical space. If someone comes in with like an injury, immediately being able to tell who this person is, what their blood type is, and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
that's what I envision. No idea how far
Right.
away that is, but it's also a little scary, but definitely
Yeah,
interesting.
I'd say that the other reason it's kind of moving away from that the use like gaming is that if you're buying a VR game, you're most likely already going to have the headset that you need for it to be compatible with the game. Um, and the reality is, for this functional use of AR and VR, the hardware is still not at a place that every person has it. It's just a bit too expensive and in certain cases hard to use. So that's why I think adoption has been slow in other areas, is because things have required you to have a headset. So for example, with Wizio, we can't have a website that people go to but need a Oculus to use. It's just not a
Yeah.
reality at the moment. So you have to make it more accessible for everyone, which is why we're all mobile and web based at the moment. We used to have headset compatibility, but it got very little use, and it didn't make sense to keep that as a supported feature. And I think probably in 2 or 3 years that might start to change, um, just as new companies come out with cheaper alternatives to the headsets that are currently on the market.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, requiring anyone to do anything outside of their home, I think, with a headset is a little much. Like
Yep.
no one really wants to do that. But what do you think? I mean, there's like been a lot of guessing, a lot of speculation. But what do you think is going to be the piece of hardware that people are actually going to be wearing that allows them to tap into this like virtual or augmented world? Because I've always pictured something like a Google Glass, not the way they made it, but maybe like a hologram or something, but definitely, I think glasses, from
Yeah.
my point of view, are something that I think would be leading the way in hardware.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say glasses or sunglasses, some sort of mix between the Google Glass and something like the Snapchat spectacles, I'd say. Um,
Yeah.
I think that would become the most widely adopted. I think it's not something that you would feel weird about using, I'd say, as long as it doesn't look ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, you have to cross that from weird to mainstream, and then kind of everyone hops on.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's awesome to hear. It's always exciting to watch like this space. It's definitely a big buzzword, VR, but it's really cool to see you guys actually putting that into use. getting real customers and creating real value for multiple ecosystems. Excited for you guys to continue growing in Boston. Hopefully, you guys come to New York soon. There's definitely a lot of opportunity and a lot of work to be done in the city in terms of real estate. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Take care.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening. If you like what you heard, go rate and subscribe to the podcast. Even share it if you think the lessons were valuable. Stay tuned for more episodes, and till next time.